Welcome to heCast, the official podcast of He Changed It. My name is Mike Chisholm, and as always, I like to take you through this conversational adventure through talking about men's mental wellness with all sorts of different people. I'm excited to be here. I'm always excited to do this. It's the highlight of my week to come in here and shoot one of these podcasts and talk about where we're at as a company, where we're at as a movement, and where things are at in the world of mental wellness. If you haven't downloaded the He Changed It app yet, what are you waiting for? Come and grab it. Go to either one of the app stores, search up He Changed It. You will find it. The app is called He. Download it. It's free. Tons of resources, all sorts of cool stuff being added to it. If you like the topics in this podcast, if you like the podcast for any reason whatsoever, we invite you to share it. We invite you to subscribe to it and then share it. Leave comments, that kind of thing. We have a community within the He Changed It app where we talk about the podcast as well. And I'm just really excited to see the growth of where everything is going. So yeah, thank you very much for, we've been here doing this for about a year now already. Got 60 something episodes under our belt during a pandemic, and we're just getting started. Today, I'm having another amazing, interesting, insightful conversation with an interesting, insightful individual. His name is Ben Goerner. He is, he is a counselor, but more on a retired side of, he doesn't do it as a day job anymore. He is now more considered an advocate. And, he's a facilitator of a family group and has a lot to say on the subject specifically of substances, substance abuse, the misconceptions with substances, and really has a heart for wanting people to understand the truths about these things. And, is part of the Mom Stop the Harm group, which we will talk to him about. And this is our first actual podcast talking to somebody from that group or a part of that movement. And the first of many. We've got a lot of people coming up who are going to be guests on heCast about that. So without further ado, I would like to welcome Ben Goerner. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to sit down with our audience and explain who you are and what you're doing and some of these misconceptions when it comes to substances.
My honor and my pleasure. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
No worries, man. No worries. Before we get into the meat and potatoes of what you're doing right now, you were a decade-long counselor. Was there an area that you specialized in along the way? Was it always family? Was it always substances? Or, where did you go in your journey as a counselor?
So I've actually been in it for about over 30 years.
Wow.
And I started working with youth, actually. Mm-hmm. So we worked. I worked on the island for a couple of years, working with youth in foster care, difficult, delinquent, all the old language. Yeah. And then sort of went on with my own life at that time. Went on the road as a wannabe rock star, but that didn't work out too well. Came back and I found a job at a detox on the prairies, just sort of entry level, and decided, hey, this is in my late 20s. This is what I want to continue to do in my life, and so I went to university and got my degree in social work, and in Kelowna here, and as I did that, I started working with youth through the Boys and Girls Club at the time, and. Mostly street entrenched, the ones that were street involved and high risk and sort of moved on from there into something called parent-teen mediation, trying to reconnect people with, in fact, that was the name of the program, Reconnect youth and parents, youth and families. So about 15 years I worked with youth. I moved on specifically into addictions with youth through ARC programs, which was a great organization, and thoroughly enjoyed it, and learned a lot. So a lot of my education not only came from school, but from hands-on working with kids and working with their families.
I'll tell you, I gotta ask you when to stop you on that. Like, I assume that the book learning and the classroom learning, a lot of that stuff can go out the window once you start with that hands-on stuff, I would assume.
How I describe it for me, my experience of that was I had a lot of experience before I went into school.
Yeah.
Because I worked with youth and whatnot before that. And what university did was help put context to what I was doing. Okay. It helped me understand, oh, that's why I did that. That's why that didn't work. That's why, those kinds of things.
Right.
So it developed context and opened a lot more doors in terms of the kind of work that I could do, gave me a lot more tools to use. It's like going to the hardware store and buying your tools and coming home, and then you learn how to use them. Does that make sense?
It totally makes sense. Yeah.
So that's, in a nutshell, that's how I would describe that for sure.
So if there was one thing you wanted, because we got dads that listen to this podcast as well, moms for that matter too, but it's mostly a male audience. If there was one thing that when it comes to teenagers, you're talking about a wide variety of issues. But at the same time, as these kids are in that process, moving towards being an adult, you've got all these biological changes, you've got all these emotional changes, these hormonal changes that are happening. And I think it's safe to say that every kid goes through their own journey. However, there's got to be some big, broad strokes. If there was any kind of tips or advice or things that you would throw out there to help people as they go through and help support these creatures, these young creatures that we care about so much, moving to the next level, what would that be?
Well, the first thing that comes to mind is of course, what I'm doing right now is trying to support families, right? Yeah. So, and this I learned very quickly as I was doing parent-teen mediation. Parents, families do the absolute very best they can do with what they know.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But they don't know everything. And that's not a shot or put down or anything. No. We don't. We learn. We always learn something new, right?
Yes.
And many families, many parents feel like they don't know everything, but they won't admit it sometimes. But but that's the biggest thing is families do the very best, and they need to learn.
Right.
So they need to get, for instance, around addictions or substance use in general, not just addictions, but, the whole spectrum, is learning about substance use in its truest form rather than what our society has labeled it as. Does that make sense?
Oh, 100%. I would like to go down that path with you for sure.
Yeah.
But if I'm hearing you right, at the end of the day, we all take advice, or we all hear advice from well-meaning sources.
Yeah.
I use this example when it comes to finances all the time. Many times we're given advice from well-meaning people who haven't made it financially. They've just kind of given them you a perspective from their journey so far. But at the same time, if I'm hearing you right, if you're a family, if you're in charge of a family or a part of a family and there's something going on, don't just go by your experience, but actually be willing to learn from people who have been through it, from people who teach about this stuff, from people who are more down that rabbit hole a little bit, other than our kind of topical lived experience. Does that make sense? Is that what you're saying?
Well, I'm saying, I think in most part, I'm always cautious with lived experience. Lived experience can teach us a lot of things about what people are going through, how they feel, what they see, what I see from my lived experience, right? My experience always, I guess, colors a little bit of what I do, right?
Sure.
So I have to recognize what my lived experience does. This problem with that, for lack of better ways of saying this, is that some people think their lived experience is the be all and end all.
Yes.
And that's not okay. That's where education is really handy.
Yes.
So I always caution people when they listen to people with lived experience, because yes, that's how they feel. Absolutely. They were betrayed, they're terrified, or they're, all sorts of things that they go through. Absolutely. Everybody goes through that.
Sure.
What they did about it may or may not have been effective.
Yes.
So we have to, educate ourselves and all of that. And I use that same approach with youth. Because I want to go back to, I don't want to look like I'm blaming families.
No, not at all.
Because what I would say about youth, if you're looking for that first question of one size fits all, I guess, for lack of better ways, is youth. I guess let's go back to family. Youth need structure, even though they don't like structure. They do need structure because it provides them a safe environment. Yeah. In order to grow in ways that and draw them out, right?
Yes.
So that's what education is supposed to be about, is to help draw those youth out. So my thing for youth is, and for parents, comes right down to one word: listen.
Yeah.
Listen and don't interrupt. And that goes for both, I guess, if that makes sense.
2 ears, 1 mouth.
Yeah, exactly.
And easier said than done many times. I'm sure we're going to get more into this as we get into your story. I want to talk about Mom Stop the Harm as an organization. So, and I want to maybe connect the dots to, you went through your counseling practice and the evolution of that, and Mom Stop the Harm came along later on, right?
Oh, much, yeah.
Okay. So, and I want to get to that because the misconceptions about substances is really important nowadays. And I think that we're at a turning point where you're seeing governments actually starting to pay attention to this right now. It's an unprecedented time and place. So I want to get to that. So can we maybe move to your career as a counselor and have evolved to where you are right now? Let's maybe paint that picture a little bit.
We'll jump to now. Time travel. So after working with youth, I did start working with adults as well as youth. Actually, a big job for me was in 2007 to 2010. I was my title was crystal meth stimulant abuse counselor. So I had specific.
There's a hell of a business card right there.
Yeah, exactly. So what that provided me with was a lot of time to do research on that. Which helped me learn much more. It really opened my mind to addiction and what it is and how it functions, and the operations. Anyway, I won't go into that right now, but a great opportunity. It also brought in a new opportunity for me for community presentations because of the crystal meth peak or crisis back in the day, right?
Yep.
So I was doing a lot of community presentations at the time, which turned me onto that, right? Being a wannabe rock star, I found my niche in terms of doing presentations.
Yes.
So it was a presentation. There's a long story in there, but there's a presentation that I developed and started, I won't say marketing, but trying to promote.
Yeah. Getting awareness for it. Yeah.
Yeah. On the war on drugs. It was inspired by a book by Johann Hari called Chasing the Scream. I really recommend it for everybody.
Yeah.
To learn about the history of how drugs became illegal and how that has impacted, like I said in the beginning, how that has impacted how we believe and do the things and develop the policies that we develop now based on racist ideas developed 100 years ago in the States.
Yes.
And in Canada.
Yes.
So I was doing that presentation.
And that's a hell of a deep rabbit hole. Like, I mean, if we're going from, there's all sorts of things that are from when marijuana became illegal, as to how that happened and the root of the word, all the way to when you look at sentencing laws in the 80s between powder cocaine and crack cocaine. We're talking like this. That's an expansive topic right there.
Oh, huge.
Never mind the misconceptions as to what drugs actually do to people.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
Well, it's a huge topic for sure. And it's unfortunately not a topic that the majority of us know about.
Yes.
Right? It's just coming out, really.
Would you say that we as a populace are, is it safe to say that we are the victims of propaganda when it comes to this subject?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I can go into that at the moment, or if you want to wait to go into that part of it. Because you were asking about Mom Stop the Harm. That's why.
Yeah. And I mean, I think it's all going to be related, and it's all going to come together in a beautiful puzzle that we're doing here. We're just talking about different pieces of it right now.
Mom Stop the Harm is very, very on board, on the same page with, how the war on drugs has impacted us, and their whole mandate and agenda right now is to work on certain goals we can talk about in a few minutes.
Yes.
But what happened was, when I was working with adults in 2016, well, actually earlier than that, but in 2016, one particular client passed from an overdose that I was closely working with, and with his family. And, that one hit me for some reason. I mean, a lot of them hit me, but of course that one did too. And of course it hit the family. Right. And anyway, we lost contact for a while from the family and whatnot. I guess naturally so. But I was doing my presentation on the war on drugs, and the mom came into that presentation and was there. And she told me afterwards about Mom Stop the Harm and what they were doing. And she said, we're on the same page, basically. I can't remember the conversation. But basically, we ended up agreeing, we're both on the same page. We both know a lot about the war on drugs, that kind of thing. And it was very soon after she invited me to join Mom Stop the Harm. By the time I retired, I'd lost count, but I had stopped counting at about 40 losses within my caseload. Right.
God damn. What does that do to you?
Yeah. I'm surprised. I'm still feeling that.
Yeah.
Well, I retired.
No, I mean,
I had to.
Yeah.
And that's a whole other issue we could talk about is, post-traumatic and vicarious trauma and those kinds of things, but we'll leave that aside because it's really affecting, frontline workers right now. But anyway, so the mom and I got together, in terms of the organization, and she invited me in, and I started getting involved in the advocacy and stuff. And it just really, really, really loved it. I loved working with it. To be honest, I hate hearing their stories. If we have a meeting, I have to prepare myself because these are all moms and dads that have lost children. And, it's not just a business meeting that we have. It's emotional.
Yes.
And so I have to put my stuff in one corner and be ready to get affected by their stuff. And, but we support each other. And I think, I get mushy here. I think we kind of love each other, in at least in common ground, right? And we love
this, and we see it every day. We hear about it every day, literally every day. If you wanted to hear about it, if you wanted to hear about somebody being lost to overdose, to drug abuse, to these things, you could hear about it every single day, multiple times. And I think the vast majority of us turn a blind eye to it. And you're telling me and telling our audience about a group of people who are not turning a blind eye and who are actually looking pretty hard at a site and dealing with something that is not the easiest thing to look at.
Yeah. I think, as you said, I know you're having some of the other members on for your podcast. So I'll let them do the details. But what I can say is that, the organization has grown from about 6 people in 2016 that I know of. I could be wrong. Don't quote me on that.
Yep.
Including that mom that I talked about.
Yep.
To well over 3,000 now in Canada.
Yeah.
It's 2016. Think about that for a second.
Absolutely.
Right. 3,000 families that are belonging to this organization, over 7,000 deaths, and counting, like hundreds every, more than 20 every day anyway, I think.
And folks who want to look up Mom Stop the Harm, just Google Mom Stop the Harm. You'll see the organization and what they're all about, and what they're doing about it. And again, that proactivity is just astounding to me. And sometimes inspiration comes in the form of tragedy. And if you want to talk about a group that's inspirational, this is a group to talk about. And heartbreaking stuff. Yeah.
The courage and resolve and rage,
Yeah.
This group is getting angry at the government.
What are they getting angry about?
So this leads into, the sort of the bottom line of what we're looking for.
Yep.
We're looking for decriminalization and for safe supply.
Yep.
To sort of sum it up in a small, complex sentence.
So when you say decriminalization, we've got a wide variety. We've got 13 or 14 countries that listen to this broadcast. So let's give some context. So in Canada, we've had marijuana decriminalized. Down in the States, when it comes to state issues, things like that, I know the state of Oregon has just made a move to decriminalize substances, all substances, I believe. There are different countries around the world that have experimented with this. When it comes to decriminalizing drugs, what are we talking about here? And if there are some main key points as to why you think that that's important, what would those be?
So there's a difference between decriminalization and legalization.
Okay.
So marijuana was legalized. So
right.
Marijuana can now be sold in stores. You can have, there is a cap on your possession, but, same, I guess alcohol, there isn't a cap, is there?
Not that I'm aware of.
You can buy, yeah, exactly. But there is a cap on how much marijuana you can grow, that kind of thing. So it is regulated, and it is publicly sold, right? So that's legal.
Okay.
It's not illegal to sell marijuana. It's, you can have a store, so you must have pounds and pounds of it somewhere, right?
Sure. Yep.
Right. So that's legal. That's in this social network. That's in the social fabric.
Yes.
Which it always has been, but now it's just legal.
Right. So
decriminalization, drugs are still illegal. Okay.
Yes.
Decriminalization, and that's even complex. So Vancouver, let's take Vancouver, for instance. They've applied for decriminalization in their region or in their municipality or whatever.
Yep.
So what they've applied for is a form of decriminalization that some other countries, including Portugal, have implemented. And what that kind of decriminalization does is drugs are still illegal to sell.
Yes.
But you can have a certain portion of drugs on your person for personal use.
Right.
Right.
And you won't be prosecuted for that.
You won't be prosecuted in the criminal system.
Right.
But what will happen is if you are caught in that system, as far as I understand it, and you have this certain amount of drugs, let's say you're at the cap, I guess. And again, this may differ a little bit. I'm not totally up on the legal aspects of this.
Okay.
But what I understand of it, there you go, is that, once you're caught with this, then you're sanctioned. You're directed to go to maybe a drug court, or maybe to, like in Portugal, you go to a panel.
Yep.
Where there's a social worker and a mental health worker or something, along those lines, right? Which just seems like a really great idea.
Sure.
You're still mandated to go there. In Portugal, you don't necessarily have to follow through with their recommendations, depending on the situation.
Right.
The way I could be wrong, but the way I understand Vancouver is that you have to follow through with the recommendations of whatever panel they set up or that kind of thing.
Right.
Now, don't forget, Vancouver hasn't gotten that yet.
No,
they're just submitting it. So,
but they're idealized. They're idealized in the idea that when it comes to drugs, which are everywhere, the idea of treatment versus punishment is the direction that they are looking to go. Yep. And it's still kind of, carving through the jungle where there's no pathway with a machete, trying to figure out exactly what that looks like. But the overarching idea is a treatment versus a punishment scenario, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. But that has its pros. Absolutely. Yep. We'd like to switch our thinking from criminalization. But what we've done is we're switching from criminalization to medicalization.
Okay.
Okay. So now we've medicalized, which we're trying to do, get it into health. We've been doing that for years. It should be a health issue, not a criminal issue. But now we're learning, as we consult with people with lived experience, as we brought up before,
yes,
people who actually use drugs are saying, no, that's not the decriminalization that we want. And as a counselor, I agree with that.
Yep.
And as a member of Moms Stop the Harm, which we're fighting for, we're hashtag decrim done right. Now, what hashtag that means?
Decrim done right. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Decrim done right. What that means, in a nutshell, and there's more to it, obviously, but in a nutshell means no sanctions, right. No sanctions, and no limits. The problem with the Vancouver model is providing limits, for instance, to the amount of opiates that you can carry.
Okay.
Okay. Most opiate users have such a high tolerance.
What are we talking when we're talking opiates?
Opiates, heroin,
yep.
Fentanyl,
yep.
All opiates.
Okay. Yeah.
Just blanket, right?
Yeah.
So if there's a cap on all opiates, basically, that's what they're proposing. But what happens is the people that are struggling with the disorder, with opiate disorder, their tolerance is far above that cap.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
So,
and you hear this for people who, I'll give you an anecdotal situation where you hear about this when it comes to tolerance. And I think that there's a big misconception when it comes to tolerance. So you've got somebody who is a heavy heroin user with the tolerance that you're talking about, kind of sky high. And then they get clean, for lack of a better term. That's the term that they use. They get clean for a few years. And then one night they slip off and they go back to what they knew. And then immediately their biological system seizes on them because that tolerance is no longer. So, and they, it comes to weaning people off and things like that. It's a pretty complex issue. It's not just trying heroin. There's a whole rabbit hole there, isn't there?
Oh yeah. Yeah, okay. Absolutely.
Okay.
You can sort of relate that back to the 80s when the Just Say No campaign was on and how deadly that was.
Yeah, that's my generation right there. My generation, I can tell you, we feel hoodwinked. Yeah. We feel like the wool was pulled over. And I'm not saying everybody, I'm not saying all of us, but I know I can count, definitely not on my fingers and toes. It's way higher than that of the number of people who I know personally that I went to elementary and high school with that were told, marijuana being a prime example, but all drugs also. I think about psychedelics and what we were told about psychedelics versus what's happening now. As this information is coming out, psilocybin and DMT and some of these things, what we were told in school is very different than the actual scientific reality.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's the sort of propaganda thing. And there's a whole bunch of reasons behind that we can get into, we won't, but the propaganda was there. It had its purpose, and it pushed the lies, basically.
Yeah.
So back to Vancouver model, this whole decriminalization thing, even the Portugal model is as great as it sounds. The Pivot Legal Society in Vancouver has actually interviewed people from Portugal, I guess, I gather from what they're writing about.
Yep.
And that's what they're getting from lived experience. And even in Portugal is that they're still being targeted on the streets. They're still being targeted by police, even though it's not a criminal offense. The police still have for lack of better words, jurisdiction on, hey, show me your pockets.
Right.
And if this opiate user has the appropriate amount for them,
yes,
but over the cap, they're into the legal. They're a criminal. They're into the legal system.
Yeah. Okay.
Right. And
they're
so
subject to punishment again.
Exactly.
Yep.
And so it doesn't take the police out of the equation. And what we're trying to do to really decriminalize without sanctions, decrim done right, is get the police right out of it.
Right.
You want this to be a health issue. And for me, I would say not just a health issue, a social issue, because there's so many other risk factors involved in how addiction develops, not just medical, right? All these social, environmental things that happen.
Right.
So it's a medical and a social issue. They both have to be equally as strong. Medical has its role, but so does social. And we need to have that as strong, at least, as medical.
Well, so there's lots of moving parts here. And I mean, there's also the idea of the culture. And I mean, I think the culture has to do with the social, but let's take the culture when it comes to the business of drugs. And I mean, you talk about all these black markets that are out there because of the criminalization aspect of things. And that creates other environments that affect the culture and the social part of it too. I guess that would all fall under social, or it's a big issue.
Yeah. I mean, we've put a capitalist ideology to black market, right?
Yes.
And, and that's what's happening. It's functioning the way it's supposed to as a market.
Absolutely.
Right. Which brings up that issue. Decriminalization and legalization, actually ending prohibition, if we can look at it that way.
Yeah.
If we end prohibition of drugs,
yes,
then what we do is we take the power away from that organized business sector.
Yes.
We put it under regulated systems.
Yes.
Right. Probably the health system, because it is a health concern.
Yeah.
But in partnership with social systems.
Yes.
So we put it there. And like with alcohol, when you read about alcohol, when it was prohibited, there were overdoses with alcohol because people were adding toxic substances to the alcohol.
Yes.
Alcohol, moonshine, right?
Yes.
All of the whatever shine, you choose, right?
Stuff made in the homemade stills that where the levels aren't right.
Yep, exactly. And so everything was being done by people who don't have regulations, who don't maybe have the experience don't have a degree in chemistry, all of those kinds of things, right? So now look at us. We're in this epidemic of death because business is good, right? Yeah. And, and it's run by people who don't know what they're doing aside from business.
Yes.
They know their business. Let's make it stronger. Let's make it more dependent. So people are dependent on it, and we'll make more money from it.
That all goes away if we legalize, right? In your opinion?
Eventually. Yeah. Eventually. We're not seeing that yet with the market with marijuana. Many people are still accessing the black market for their, they have their trusted dealers, that kind of thing. Yeah. There's a lot of black market still going on.
Yeah.
But of course, many more are not, right?
Right.
So you now have a choice. If you want to choose a product that is not tainted, you know where to go.
Right.
Right. That's what's happening in Vancouver right now. For instance, let's move on to harm reduction a little bit.
Yep.
And safe supply. So in Vancouver, they've actually got some vending machines now. They've got a program called MySafe, and they have vending machines in place where I don't know if you need I don't know enough about it. I think you need a prescription, but you put your prescription in there and you get the amount that you are prescribed.
Interesting.
Yeah. And so it's been a pilot project. It's been expanded now, and it's working quite well within a small population, unfortunately, but still it's working. It's a step, right? So,
well, and that's kind of what needs to happen, right? Like, I mean, when the legalization happens, or the, decrim done right, however it gets sliced, however that happens, you got to kind of let it breathe for a little while and figure out exactly the right places to go in a safe environment. And it sounds like that's what's happening down there with these ideas, these experiments that folks are doing. But at the end of the day, safe to say, in your opinion, that what we've been doing over the last few decades has not been working.
No. Has drug use decreased?
Not that I'm aware of.
Has crime decreased?
No.
Right?
No.
And those were the intended carrots that criminalization was,
putting
in front of us as a public, that would happen. We would reduce crime, and we would reduce the supply. Supply has certainly increased and become far more toxic.
I think, and you add into it all the other stuff. Like, we don't have it here in Canada that I'm aware of in the same way that we don't have it in the States, but you look at the private prison system and the economy now that has been created, that is necessary for people using drugs. I forget the stats of people that are in private prisons due to drug offenses, but the stats are astounding. And when you get lobbies for businesses, and I say that businesses, it's a big business of incarcerating people. Boy, that sure shows that we've gone down a path, and undoing that path has a lot of domino effects as well. And I mean, I guess that's part of the uphill battle that you guys are facing as being advocates to do this. Yeah,
it's a huge battle because it's connected to more than just drugs, right? When we go back to why they became decriminalized, the answer is race, or perceived race.
Yep.
Basically, in the States, when I talked about 100 years ago, the fellow Harry Anslinger, who was the sort of forerunner to the DEA, right? When prohibition ended, he had to create a job. So he did. He created the propaganda around marijuana.
Right.
And he would use the N-word.
Yep.
He would talk about white women wanting to.
Yep.
Excuse my language, and I don't want to offend anyone.
No, we can swear on here. We're good.
Okay.
The Man Podcast. Goddamn.
But I don't want to do sound anything like racist at all.
Yeah.
But he was. And that whole propaganda, that whole campaign was based on the fact that they couldn't control the Black population at the time in the States.
Yeah.
Now let's bring it to Canada. What happened with opium in Vancouver after the Chinese race riots, right? The very first move, I believe by Mackenzie, was let's criminalize opiates.
And this is convenient timing for what was going on south of the border too, right? We just kind of needed a reason for it.
All of it.
Yeah,
all of it. When you look at the Nixon era, the term war on drugs was termed at that point. I mean, it started long before then, but okay, so Nixon can take that credit if he wants. But
this is when psychedelics, they went another level with that when they criminalized psychedelics and things like that.
They criminalized everything.
Yeah.
And to make a long story short, even Ehrlichman, I don't know if you remember Ehrlichman, he was chief advisor to Nixon at the time, and he was jailed for all his. I guess he was the fall guy or the patsy for the Nixon Watergate stuff, right?
Yeah.
And but when he was released, they interviewed him, and he actually said, "You can look this up." He actually said, "Did we know? We couldn't fight Black people, we couldn't fight hippies, we couldn't fight students, but we could fight drugs."
Yeah.
So we made drugs illegal. I'm paraphrasing here.
Yeah.
We made drugs illegal so that we could actually break into their houses and arrest those people. And he admitted it. Did we know this? Did we know we were lying to the people? Of course we did. Quote. So,
wow.
Based on racism, based on targeting certain people. And when you look at Canada's history, it's very similar. I don't have an Ehrlichman to show you.
No.
But you just have to read through our history, or I don't know if it's taught in school like that, but our real history, and you'll see how race impacts. So there's a really big connection between race and decriminalization. And when you talk about prisons,
we could talk forever about this stuff. And you know what, Ben, seriously, let's do this again. Because I think we've got a million subtopics that we could get into here on this. And I'm glad that there are folks like you, who educated folks, actually people who actually are looking at this, not just because of being advocates for the life experience, but also who are looking for a solution, looking for a better way. It's so good to hear about this. I want to talk about your group, what you are doing specifically, and if there's a call to action for folks that want to either get educated on this stuff, or they want to be involved as advocates, or they're going through it in their own family, how they can deal with this stuff. So let's kind of finish off talking about that. First off, the groups that you have, things like that.
So the group I have is called Holding Hope Kelowna.
Yep.
And it's brand new. Basically, it's not even a year old across the province. And it's going across Canada. So, which is great. I'm really happy for that, because families, one thing that was missing in treatment programs and that kind of thing was family involvement.
Yes.
So, which we desperately need families to do. Remember what I said before, they're trying to do the best they can with what they know.
Yeah.
So let's provide them with an opportunity to share their feelings and emotions and experiences.
Yes.
And share some of the solutions, some of the do's and don'ts.
Yes.
Of supporting someone you love, right?
Yes.
It's going through it. So that's what we do. We come. The group is mostly peer led.
Yep.
And with people who are actually still going through the journey of working with a loved one. So very, very peer based, very what do you say? Grassroots based.
Absolutely. Well, and that's what He Changed It is. I mean, that's exactly what we are, is looking for how men can help other men. Our whole thing is take something that you need and leave something that and we sharpen each other, that kind of thing. So you're speaking to you're preaching to the choir when it comes to the peer-led, the strength of the peer-led opportunity here for solution. That's a beautiful, beautiful thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And I appreciate how you said that, take something that you need and leave something that, I'll have to remember that.
That's what we're trying to do, man. Because it's about vulnerability, and vulnerability is really tough sometimes when you need something, but when you have something, vulnerability is really easy because you just give it, And so that's what the whole, Candy and her whole team, when it comes to He Changed It, are banking on, is a place that guys can be vulnerable. And the gateway to that is leaving something that
Yeah. I guess my role in my particular group, and there's a couple of others of us that have a lot of experience in terms of counseling and that kind of thing. It's not meant to be run by counselors. However, here we are.
People keeping it on the rails.
Yeah, I am a counselor, so and I was asked to run it because of my experience with families and that kind of thing.
Yes,
and my own lived experience. So that that's fine. So again, back to my sort of primary goal is to make sure that people are sharing the right information.
Right.
Right. And there's lots of examples of that. I won't go into it, but there's a lot of misinformation out there, a lot of myths, a lot of things that we've done over the years and the really important message here is your journey is going to be different than my journey. Right. And, so what might work for you really well might not fit in my family. Yeah. I might have to do something a little bit different. Yeah. But this is where, like you say, this is where we share those experiences and go, oh, I didn't think of that. Right.
Yeah.
Or, or I can say, what if you tried this?
Right.
How did that work for you so far, right? And what if you tried this? And that's how we share back and forth, right? And they become emotional sometimes, for sure. But
it's
and
nothing but emotion. I mean,
vulnerable.
my gosh.
Yeah, I mean, vulnerable, absolutely, right? Yeah. I mean, here's terrified family members who are dealing with mostly adult children. Some have younger children, like teenagers, but mostly adult, that are on the streets, that are, is their next use their last use, and so there's so much. Yeah.
I appreciate there are men like you and women like Arlene and the whole movement that's happening with Mom Stop the Harm. I appreciate that people like you exist and, are solution seekers. You've used the word solution a few times, and I'm a fan of that. I'm a fan of not focusing on the problem, but focusing on the solution. We're moving to where I told you it was going to go by fast. Okay. And there's so much that we could talk about. I mean, I on the off chance that we kind of got done early, so to speak, I was going to ask you about psychedelics and healing and psychedelics. I think that's probably another podcast down the line. But at the end of the day, let's close up here and let's focus on what do you want to promote. So if we can promote people into your group and into what's happening and a Mom Stop the Harm, let's do hashtags and social media stuff and websites. So because there are people that are, like you say, they've got a family member who's going through something like this. They're terrified. Can they themselves reach out, then bring their family with them? What's the first step for people who are in this situation?
Basically, to recognize that you can't do it yourself. Just like the person struggling with drugs needs support.
Yeah.
That person, the family member, needs support.
Yeah.
So reach out, right? That's absolutely reach out. So you're talking about where can I reach out?
Yes.
Before Mom Stop the Harm, I used to access a website called Here to Help BC.
Here to Help BC.
Here to Help BC works with it works with the people that are struggling with drugs, and it works with the people who are trying to support them.
Okay.
Right. So there's two different streams on that website.
And the beautiful thing about the internet is you can go on that website from wherever you are hearing this.
Absolutely. Yep. You can go on there and Here to Help BC, and it's a really good website. There are some things on there that are dated, but I won't say don't consider them, because again, everybody's journey is different.
Sure. It's a great jumping off point, at least, and you'll learn some stuff there.
Say what'll work for you and what will work for you, right?
Yep.
So there's a list of stuff there, and you look at it, and like you say, you take what you need and go from there.
Yep.
Momstoptheharm.com.
Momstoptheharm.com.
Yeah. Supporting not only if you've lost a loved one, they have Healing Hearts, which is a grief and loss group, and it's growing. Unfortunately, it's growing. But it is fortunate. The good part of that is there's support there for people who've gone through the grief and loss.
Well, the thing about it is it's growing because the awareness is there, and the problem is so big, and it needs to grow before it can shrink, because it needs to grow to help cope with the staggering numbers that are happening. The group needs to be big, and then it needs to shrink down, right?
Well, the group needs to be big. Yeah. So don't wait for your kid to die.
Yeah.
Before joining.
There it is.
So if that could be the main message, because what you say is the group, it needs to get bigger. Well, this is what we're trying to prevent. We don't want it to get bigger. We don't want more people to die.
No, absolutely not. But the problem is the awareness, the group needs to be bigger just because of the awareness of what's happening. How many families are actually going through this without being part of groups like this, and they don't even know the support. And the problem is so big. And that's how we need to, awareness and education is what's going to be the silver bullet to tackling this.
And a safe place, like you say, with the men's group, safe place to come and go, blah.
Yeah.
Here's what's going on, right? I need to cry about this. I need you to hear me cry about this.
Yep.
All of those things, right? So that's the important thing about Holding Hope Kelowna, and there's all sorts of Holding Hope groups around. There's Holding Hope Vernon. There's Holding Hope Penticton. There's about I don't know, a dozen on the island, or the island and the mainland, some in the Kootenays. So wherever you are, Holding Hope, is go to Holding Hope Canada.
Yep. HoldingHopeCanada.com. Google Holding Hope Canada. You'll find it.
Sure. You'll find it.
Yep.
Or go through mumstoptheharm.com. You'll definitely find it through mumstoptheharm.com. Right. Yep. And then you'll find your support. You'll find out what Mum Stop the Harm is doing. You can become an advocate.
Yep.
To help change drug policy. You can get help and support with your struggling loved one that's going through it. And you can get help and support for grief and loss. And that, in that sense, yes, it's growing. And the information that's being provided, we're hyper-focused on evidence-based, hyper-focused on harm reduction, and all of those kinds of things.
Retirement. It's like a new career for you.
Yeah. I'm actually finding myself, I got two Zooms today. I hold my group is tonight. So that's usually an hour and a half to 2 hours. I'm a musician, so I'm constantly recording and writing. A lot of my songs are about this. And
hey, are they available?
I have a YouTube channel.
Let's plug that, man. Come on, let's do it.
All right. Yeah. So look up my name, Ben Goerner, Goerner.
Goerner. Yeah, I asked him for his pronunciation just to make sure I had it right.
I know,
Goerner. Yeah,
that's cool. So yeah, Ben Goerner's YouTube channel. My brother and I do a lot of writing together, and so he's involved in the majority of material that we write. And but a lot of my songs are about, I lost somebody years ago, and I wrote a song, and I've lost somebody last year in my retirement, someone I was close to, and I wrote a song, and I've written songs all in between about, mental health, songs about hearing voices, songs about living on the streets, songs, and songs about healing too, right? It's not all death and gore.
This is your outlet this is your outlet from helping people find their outlet.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Wow.
I find writing especially with grief, when I can write about it and then sing and have that process of, chanting out the grief.
You get it out.
Yeah.
Artists, in particular, if they lean into their art, whatever it is, whether it's professional or an amateur or whatever it is, when you lean into your art, I find that you're really, you can really, probably avoid therapy because it is therapy. You know what I mean? Like you lean into that and you can really get out some of the stuff that gets piled up, and it's a beautiful release.
It is. And we could show that scientifically too, I'm sure, but we'll leave it down the road.
Ben, I hate to end this, but we're going to end it. And I just want to say thank you. I'm so glad. Hey, and I owe Arlene, a cheers for hooking us up and
wonderful lady, beautiful lady.
Oh, it's going to be, we're trying to get her on here too. So that's going to be awesome. But at the same time, I just want to say thank you very much. I'm really grateful that we can use you as a resource. We're going to find ways to implement. We've just scratched the surface here with Ben, and we're going to find ways to take your resources. And if we can put them in, he changed it. We're going to do that. We're going to explore ways to do this here. Thank you so much for doing what you're doing, man. I just appreciate it so much. And thank you for taking time out of your day to be here.
Thank you. And thank you for having me. And just one more little plug.
Yes, sir.
On my Facebook page, I write weekly articles with another fella who's in Mum Stop the Harm.
Yep.
And we talk about family experience and what to do, sort of our group, that kind of thing. Right now, I'm immersed in writing articles about a certain kind of therapy. So all of this is going out weekly.
Okay.
And I try and share it to just local groups like, Kelowna Community Forum and, those kinds of things. And so watch for them, I guess is what I can say for now. I'm trying to expand that, but because I think the articles talk a lot about what what the problem is.
We'll talk to the powers that be, and maybe there's some ways that we can hijack and give you a bigger audience for that.
Yeah, it would be nice.
Okay, well,
that's my purpose, man. I want.
All right, well, let's do it. Let's talk about this.
Yeah, sure.
We are certainly not. We're finished this podcast, but we're certainly not finished with Ben Goerner and everything that he is doing and the efforts. And I just am so grateful to have these types of conversations and have my consciousness expanded a little bit. I hope yours has been too. This has been another episode of heCast, the official podcast of He Changed It. My name is Mike Chisholm. Go change something.